Good morning, Ellis. How are you?
Good morning, Gary.
Listen, before we get to this weekend, I want to get your analysis from what happened down in the swamp this past Saturday. I think most of us, when I say most of us, me and everybody else pretty much that I talked to, thought Auburn would win that football game down there. And Florida, it was an ugly game. It was sloppy, but Florida's defensive line really played well. And for the first time this season, Bo Nix struggled, and I mean really struggled, and they couldn't get it going offensively with the running game more in the passing game, and Florida gets out of there with a 24-13 win and remains undefeated, and now has a lot of momentum in the Eastern Division. What did you think of that game?
Well, I was one of those that did think Auburn would come out on top in a close game, even though they were playing away. But I thought two things happened, and we've talked about this, leading up week to week to week. I thought that Florida's defense proved to be better than maybe people thought they were, and they really played better, maybe than Auburn's defense. I think Auburn's defense played solid. But the other thing we learned is that Trask is the consistent player, and although his stats weren't real flashy, he had no interceptions, and he took care of the ball, and Nix was not able to. And I think you have to credit Florida's defense a little bit for that. They're better on defense than I thought they were, Gary. And I think they've got a shot against Georgia because if the kid can continue to play as consistent as he's playing at quarterback, their defense is just playing outstanding and giving them a chance to win these close ball games. So a disappointing loss for Auburn. In some ways, I think it had more to do with the play of Florida than it did Auburn, not playing well.
I said this yesterday, and perception can change so quickly. Going into that game, as I said, I think the perception was that Auburn was a better team and was a team that had the potential to make it to the college football playoff and may still have. But all of a sudden, you don't play well, you lose a game. Now Boobie Whitlow's out 4-6, and behind him, they don't have much in the running game. And then you look at this schedule Auburn's got ahead of it. How different is your opinion of Auburn now based on this one game than it was prior to them losing at Florida?
Well, I still think they're a good football team. I think the bottom line is we found out here that Nix cannot make these kind of plays. They can't get the running game going a little more effectively. So they just got a brutal schedule finishing out. I don't think LSU is anywhere close to Florida on defense, but Georgia is, and Alabama is pretty close. And so they've got two more teams on their schedule that have really good defenses, and that's what it's going to come down to because Auburn's still playing very well on defense. They'll have a chance to be in any ball game because of their defense, but they've got to get better play at quarterback position and status the running game again. 124 yards rushing is not terrible. But, the 2 weeks leading up, they got the thing up to where they're rushing it for about 200 plus. And that takes all the pressure off the young quarterback. So I don't, I would think they've got a very, very tall order to try to get the playoffs because they've still got three teams. I think they'll be underdogs too. Missouri's got a very, very good defense. They're waiting down the road for Florida, but I just don't see Auburn being able to score enough points all the way through that schedule.
Yeah, and Whitlow, I think they're kind of eyeing Georgia for his return, but that means they're going to have to go through games at Arkansas, at LSU, and home against Ole Miss without their top running back, and really the guy who has been their running game. How big a loss is that for Auburn?
Well, I think it's huge. I'm not as familiar with their depth as I used to be, so I don't know who's behind him. But he's really kind of a different style back, but he really fit that type of running game well that they run. A lot of inside running game with the pulls, the traps, and the powers, and he's a big, strong kid. And he's got the explosiveness once he hits the perimeter. So unless they have a really, really good player behind him, it's going to be a huge loss because there's already enough pressure on Nix.
Yeah, they got Cam Martin, who's I think rushed for under 200 yards, and I think Shivers is the other kid, and he's also under 200 yards. So they're going to be asked to pick up the slack in a hurry. Sean Shivers and Cam Martin, that's been their two guys that have run the ball the most, and they're both under 200 yards rushing, coach. So that's a big deal. For Florida, that's the nature of this league. You come off a huge home win. You got a ton of momentum. You're feeling good about yourself. You're unbeaten. And now you go on the road to LSU. So that's not long to celebrate that Auburn game. It's going to be a tough environment, obviously, for the Gators. Do you think that they have a shot?
Yeah, I do. And of course, they've got to play at Tiger Stadium. That's not going to be easy. But as long as Trask continues to take care of the football, everybody's putting points on LSU. And I think Florida can too. Now, are they going to score 40 or 50? I don't know. But unless Florida's defense has just had a few flashes, this is a really, really good defense. And I think they can hold LSU down a little bit. I think that probably, combined pass rush and the perimeter play and everything, I think they can slow their offense down a little bit. LSU, obviously, probably the most explosive offense, maybe other than Alabama. But, right now, when you see how well they played, and I know they played a rookie quarterback in Burrows on the other side is lighting it up, but I really think they can just hold LSU down, make about 4 critical stops. I think they've got a shot to win that game down there.
It'll be interesting, that's for sure. All right, Alabama coming off the bye week goes to Kyle Field in College Station. A&M coming off a bye as well, and Alabama a big favorite in this game on the road. I think it's about 18 points. Jimbo said something this week, Coach, that I thought was very honest and forthright, and you don't always get that from coaches prior to games. He just said, they asked him about Alabama and the offense and his offense and defense. He said, listen, you got to try to limit their big plays the best you can. You want to try to get some stops, but he said you got to accept the fact they're going to score some points. I mean, that's just the reality of it. He said they're just too good on offense. So you have to understand you got to score some points. Your offense has got to generate some points to have a chance to win this game.
No question. And I know everybody continues to look at Alabama and they're concerned about their defense. And it is not a typical Alabama team as we've seen it over the past 15 years. But they're still playing pretty good on the other side of the ball, too, on the defensive side. I mean, they're ranked in some critical things. Their turnovers, takeaways, they're like number 3 in the conference, top 15 in the country. Scoring defense, they're 4th in the conference and 13 in the nation. I mean, these are numbers that maybe they used to have a 1 and a 5 or something of that nature, but they're still right at the top of the conference and the nation in both scoring defense, pass yardage defense, takeaways. And so they're doing some good stuff on defense. They're making a few probably freshman mistakes where those young linebackers had to take over, and they're not just smothering people's run games the way they used to, but their defense is playing fine, and they're playing with a different style offense, and that creates a little bit more of an open-type game. But I think that the key to Texas A&M having any chance, Kellen Mond has just got to play more consistent. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit hot and cold. It was looking really good early in the season, but in the big games where they've really played good opponents, he's been very accurate. And I think Alabama is still good enough on defense. They're going to give him some problems. And I don't think Texas A&M is going to keep Alabama under 40.
If they do, it'll be quite an accomplishment. I want to ask you more about Mond because I think I'm with you. I think he's the key to that offense. He went into the season with a lot of hype, but it appears to me Jimbo really wanted to make him a throw first guy, and he can throw the ball. There's no doubt about it. But last year, particularly in the Alabama game, he really hurt teams. He hurt Alabama with his legs, not just on plays breaking down, but on some called runs. Hasn't run the ball nearly as much this year. Don't you think that's something they've got to employ in this game, using him as a kind of a dual-purpose guy to have a shot offensively to generate enough points to stay in this game?
I would think so. Now, Alabama's not been a real good rushing defense this year. They've been sort of average in that category. They've been much better against the pass. But I do think it would give him that element. And he's capable, once he gets in the perimeter, of making explosive plays. I haven't been able to watch him as closely this year. I saw most of the Clemson games way back, and I saw him a little bit more the other day against Kentucky, I think it was. But I haven't really looked at him that closely. I've seen replays, and I've studied his statistics, and it's just an inconsistency there, both taking care of the football and making critical plays and accurate throws. And Alabama's got enough pass rush and stuff. I think it's going to be hard for him. But if he does play a lot better, then they have a chance. But that would be the only thing, is he's going to have to play a lot better than he's been playing. Texas A&M have a chance to stay with Alabama.
Coach, having been through it with so many different teams, I want to ask you about the bye week from Alabama from this standpoint. Early in the year, those two young linebackers, they got thrown in there because of injuries and with no game experience. Now they got 5 games under their belt. You get a bye week. I know in some days you work on future opponents, but it's also a chance, I think, for the coaching staff to go back, self-scout, look at those first 5 games, and now you got a body of work with these two young linebackers, DJ Dale, the young nose tackle, Boybe, and Byron Young, the young defensive lineman. How big of an advantage is that to catch a bye right here and be able to coach those guys, but also having seen them play now for 5 games to help them improve for the rest of the schedule?
You can bring up a great point, and especially maybe focusing on those particular kids. And there's a lot of things you do with bye weeks. You heal up, you go back and work on things you haven't done well. You maybe slip a few plays in there. You're going to maybe even talk to kids about it. Put plays in there that they're going to see with the next opponent, and you'll have a little bit of an idea whether you feel good about what you're going to run against it. But there's a lot of things you can do with the bye week. This is a good time for it, and any time a few weeks earlier might have been a good time for it. If it's used properly, it's always a help. The only thing that coaches sometimes feel about bye weeks, if they run, especially run kind of a high-tempo type offense, you can lose a little bit of your timing and some of those elements and not be right on key as far as functioning on offense. But in any other aspect, it's got to be a help. And I think point out something really important, especially with those young players who had to pick up the ball and run with it the first 5 games. Now they've got 5 games under the belt, and the coaches can look at it with them. They can look at themselves. They can look at some things they've done, poorly or mistakes they've made. And also, hopefully they'll give them a chance to get some players behind them. I bet those 2 young ones are playing pretty well until they get tired. And then either they've got to bring somebody off the depth chart from the 3rd level, now if they've lost those 2 older ones, or the other guys have to continue to play through the team. That may be where some of the plays are breaking. It could be tired and missing some tackles or something that day.
All right, Coach, let's take our break, and when we come back on the other side, we're going to dive into some of these other games coming up this weekend. Also, as I said, if you want to get a question in for the coach, you can do so on the Bud Light Hotline powered by Adams Beverages at 205-342-9904. The coach, Ellis Johnson, with us for one more segment talking SEC football. We'll also touch on the Clemson Tigers as well. Ellis Johnson finishing up our conversation. Let's get to some other SEC games. And, Coach, interesting game in Athens. Georgia went to Tennessee, honestly struggled for a half. Now, they really laid it on in the second half against the freshman quarterback to win it going away. But South Carolina suddenly playing a little bit better between the hedges. I mean, I know it's a tough road to hoe for South Carolina. Good friends Kirby Smart and Will Muschamp matching up. Do you think there's a shot here that South Carolina can make this game interesting, or do you think Georgia's got too much firepower?
I think it'll go well for a little while because I think Carolina, through their open date and the performance of Kentucky, I think it's sort of, got a little bit of their attitude back. Mm-hmm. But I just see such a tremendous difference in these 2 teams right now overall. Unless Georgia all of a sudden has a terrible day with turning the ball over or something of that nature, I just don't think that Carolina can keep them off the board. Tennessee is a better football team than they're playing, and I think that they're just maybe 5 or 6 kids on each side of the ball don't have the dynamic playmakers right now. So what happens, they get in most every one of these games, and they look pretty equal, whereas 2 or 3 years ago they didn't even look like they belong in the same field. Mm-hmm. But when the game's over, they just haven't been able to make any big plays to have a chance to win the game. And Georgia's just full of explosive players. The return game, the passing game, the running game, defensive pressure. I mean, unless they beat themselves, I just don't see that Carolina can match up with them.
Interesting game in Knoxville from a standpoint of both these coaches feeling some heat. Obviously, we know what's happening with Jeremy Pruitt, but Joe Moorhead is, and you coached in Starkville. Those fans, they don't expect to win the SEC every year, but I think they expect their team to be tough and reach its potential. And last year, quite frankly, Mississippi State had a championship caliber defense, and they wound up, losing a bowl game to Iowa in a game they should have won easily. And now this year, not a bad team, but got blown out at Auburn. They're a favorite this weekend. I think the Mississippi State fans expect their team to win this game, and I think the Tennessee fans say, hey, we're home. This is Mississippi State. Maybe this is when we break out. This is a big game for both these coaches, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Jeremy has got to start winning some ball games. I think he's doing everything you can do the right way at Tennessee. I think he's the right man for the job. I hope they'll stick with him regardless of what happens the next 4 or 5 weeks, because it's the only way they're going to get that program back on course. But they got to start winning some ball games. Obviously, this will be one that will be a huge win for them if they can pull it off. Not necessarily beating a great football team. I think the frustration at Mississippi State, Joe was left a really good-looking roster the first year, and he's got a tremendous offensive background. And they had defensive players, tons of NFL guys in that group last year. The defense played well enough to have a championship year, and the offense was not what they hoped it would be. And they didn't feel like he used Nick, the quarterback he inherited. Didn't feel like he used him to his best skill set. And so it started some doubts about that. And what's happened coming into this season, they don't have anywhere close to the same talent level on defense that they had last year. And so they're not able to shut people down. They're not able to get as many possessions. They're not able to get as many takeaways, not making a lot of turnovers. They're just playing a little above average. And so the offense is not able to feed off of that. But I don't know if they've underachieved this year, but I don't think it's been a season they've been really excited about. But last year, the frustration was they couldn't get the offense going, playing up to the standards that the kid had played before.
Ellis, Missouri, you take away the disappointing loss to start the season at Wyoming when turnovers killed them, and they've been an impressive football team. They really have. And, they're kind of lurking there in the East. And now all of a sudden Ole Miss, even though they got handled pretty well at Alabama, I think they kind of found something with the freshman quarterback Plumlee, and then they took care of Vanderbilt. I think they feel really good about where they're at right now. This is an interesting game. Obviously, Missouri's favored and should win the game, but this Ole Miss team, I wouldn't sleep on them if I were Mizzou. I think they better be ready to play.
The game? Where are they playing, Gary?
It's in Columbia.
Okay. That'll be tough. But I think Ole Miss, if you look at their record, it's pretty average. But if you look at how they've played this year on the field, other than about 5 quarters over the whole stretch, they played a lot better than people expected them to. I think Matt got his locker room. I think he's got kids fighting through it. They're undermanned a little bit because of some of the NCAA stuff. They had to cut back on some scholarships, I think. Had some kids transfer out maybe. But they played a little better, a little tougher than people think. And I tell you, they can run the football on about anybody. They just the quarterback, Plumlee, is an outstanding dual threat, and he's made some huge plays for him with his feet. But I think one of the best kept secrets, like for lack of a better cliche, about the SEC this year is Missouri's defense. I mean, they continue to be ranked right up at the top of the league, and now they've got some games under their belt where they just weren't playing teams, not Power 5 or outside the SEC. They're playing some pretty good football teams now with the first 5 or 6 games, and they're really one of the best defenses in the conference. So I think it'll be a good matchup. Ole Miss can run it on Missouri, but they can run it on, most about anybody in the conference. And my gut feeling, I think Missouri will probably slow them down a little bit more than they've been slowed down on offense. And I think that Kelly Bryant, if he takes care of the football, he'll have another good day of total yardage running and pass. He's played really well for them this year.
All right, before we close it out, I want to ask you about Clemson. They had the bye coming off the narrow escape against North Carolina, and we're going to play the sound later in my show here, but yesterday following practice, Dabo Swinney met with reporters, and you don't see him get testy very often, but he got real touchy when he was asked about Trevor Lawrence, whether or not he was banged up or whether he had an MRI, and he said he isn't hurt, he's just human, and he went on to a long explanation about how, he's having a good year, they're undefeated, they've won all their games, but he was clearly not happy with that line of questioning, and also had said, earlier in the week that they were back on the Roy bus, the rest of y'all bus, after Alabama moved back up to number 1. It seems like he's trying to get not that they've lost their edge, but create, he accused reporters of trying to create drama. It looks like he's kind of wanting to kind of create that underdog mentality again and get this team, kind of back where they've been in the past as the hunter. It's not always fun being the hunted, is it?
No, but that's, coming into the season, the expectations were out of the roof, especially on the quarterback. And then I think they lost a couple of key offensive players. They returned a great number of the guys up front, but they lost the best player at left tackle. They lost a good core of receivers, although the ones they said behind them were more talented. I just, when I watch them, they don't seem to be on key as much as they used to. And it used to be to watch them, and guys like Trevor Lawrence was throwing to the guys, the receivers, the breaks and the cuts and the routes and whatever else, they must have been a little bit cleaner, sharper. For some reason, he's holding the ball this year a little bit. Now, I think the other thing that happened to him at North Carolina, he had to run the football too much because they couldn't get the running back going. And then he had to extend pass plays a lot because they wanted to get the ball out of his hands. And it's hard to tell on TV what the problem is unless somebody's running the wrong route or can't separate from man coverage or something. Their throws used to always be, really on time and crisp. So what's happening now, he's getting inaccurate. And I think he's getting inaccurate because of the inconsistency of the route, and possibly he's getting tired from having run the ball too much. And he took some hits the other day, too. But although they don't knock you out of the game, the more you get hit, the more you get tired, but you got a bruise on your elbow or whatever, and you're not throwing as accurately. His statistics are not terrible, but in passing yards, they're down on the bottom half of the league in pass efficiency, and that used to never be so. And they're number 12 in the conference and throwing a number of interceptions. Now, I don't think all of them have been his, but the vast majority have. I mean, they're almost number 100 in the country in throwing interceptions, and that's something they never did before. They always fed off of that running game. The throws were wide open, and they were able to be hit for big, explosive plays. And it's just not clicking right now. I hear Clemson fans all talk about how a team doesn't look good, and that's what's bothering Dabo. They're still winning.
Yeah.
They're still number one in the conference in scoring.
Yeah.
And they're still playing really good defense. I think they're taking some risks on defense, but they're still being effective. So they're in great shape. Dabo has a tendency to get a little dramatic sometimes.
Yeah.
Somebody told him they Clemson one time about 5 years ago. He went off on that one.
He went ballistic on that one. Yeah,
yep.
We got to wrap it up, but, it is when you win a couple championships, boy, the way you're judged is completely different. Hey, appreciate it, Coach. Great stuff as always. Talk to you again next week.
Enjoy it.